We're in the midst of a huge transformation where our peers, communities, and workplaces are all really melting into one. Welcome to Reimagining Company Culture. My name is Katrina Jones, she, her, and hers, and I am the Senior Partnerships Manager here at AllVoices. Today, I am very excited to welcome our next guest onto the interview series, Katrina Jones. She is the Vice President of People and Operations at the Sheryl Sandberg and Dave Goldberg Family Foundation and CEO and founder of a talent and diversity, equity, and inclusion consulting company called Advancing Equity and Inclusion. Katrina, it's so good to see you. If you're going to share a little bit about yourself for our listeners, including your pronouns, and when you were younger, do you remember exactly how you answered the question, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Yes. Thank you, Christina, and thank you so much for having me. You know my name, Katrina Jones. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I'm currently serving as the VP of People and Operations at the Sheryl Sandberg and Dave Goldberg Family Foundation. What I wanted to be when I grew up, so many different things. I wanted to be a veterinarian. Because I loved animals. I also wanted to be an attorney, so a lawyer, as well as a teacher. And I pursued all of those in some way. I went to law school for a semester before not returning. I worked as a kennel tech in high school. That was a dirty, messy, amazing experience. And I taught at the NYU Wagner School of Public Service. So in some way, I've pursued all of those things that I wanted to be.
That's awesome. And using a lot of the skills of teaching and really, motivating folks as well, and all of your experiences too. I know when we were talking, I would love to, if you could share a little bit about the decision that motivated you to move into a people operator role, specifically at the Sheryl Sandberg and Dave Goldberg Family Foundation as well.
Yeah. So my career in HR was born out of a desire to serve others, to serve people. I am very much a servant leader. That is just baked into my DNA and has always been part of how I've moved through the world. And what I saw in HR was I saw this tremendous opportunity to be in a role that work to build and both evolve organizations in both design and culture and structure, right, to better support employees, and so that organizations can meet employees' needs, but they could also just more than meet the needs of employees and people, but could actually create spaces where people could thrive, right, and grow professionally and personally. And I saw the possibilities that existed for organizations. I also saw the different needs that people had, and I was thinking about it that way. I was thinking about the needs that somebody has when they're early career, or somebody who's a parent and who's balancing responsibilities with caregiving, and somebody maybe who's at the end of their career and is trying to figure out what it looks like to move into a new path where work isn't the primary focus of their life. And this is so important to me because of how much time we spend at work. We often spend more time, energy, and effort at and with work than we do in any other area of our life, or of our lives, including with our families, right? Like including with people that we love and pursuing other things. This is where we spend and invest so much of our time and energy. And shouldn't it be great, right? Like, shouldn't it be worthwhile?
I definitely agree with you. I think the stat is somewhere around we spend on average a third of our lives working as well, and really taking that time with the team and the company you work with. And I think we've seen kind of a shift in paradigm as well with the role of work in folks' lives as well. And also the question of how do you ensure folks are empowered and that they're thriving at work, different conversations happening around really supporting caretakers, working parents, talking about mental health, which I think is really exciting. How have you really seen the evolution of the workplace and that role of the workplace in people's lives, even over the past, 2 or 3 years?
This is such a great question because the meaning of work is changing for people. And it's changing in a few different ways. One, I think people are searching for and wanting, requiring purpose in their work in ways that we have not seen before. And so what that looks like, what that means for people, they want to see um, uh, how their work, how their contributions actually contribute to something that means something to the world, that has a positive impact on this world. They, want to work in places that positively contribute and that for them, create purpose or help to bring purpose into their lives in some way. So they have purpose in, I go to work and I'm not just putting widgets together, but I'm putting these widgets together, and these widgets, help to build schools or help, patients who are sick, hospital patients who are sick, help them to breathe. So there's real meaning. And so people are looking for that from their work as well as from their workplaces. And this is, I think, a clear shift in the last couple of years. Organizations have been able to sit on the sidelines when it comes to issues of uh, uh, social issues, issues related to rights and equality, which I'm defining as social issues, but they're not, right? Like, this is about humanity and people's humanity, and workers, employees are also saying, no, it's important for me to align myself with organizations who are willing to step out and to speak out. And so there's that. Lastly, I think people are also redefining their relationship and recalculating their relationship to work in terms of time. And so time spent in work and at work and asking themselves, is this all there is? Right? So spending 60, 80 hours at work, is this all there is? Right? Like, does that go on your tombstone? Do you put that right
Oh, yeah.
on the box that they put you
Yeah.
here? Here lies X worked their ass off and spent 80 hours a week at
Yeah.
work. All the things. I think people are definitely, and we are seeing a shift now. And what that can look like for some people is saying, I work and I work 40 hours, but I am no longer, work is not the center of my life. I work to live, to be able to afford the things that I need and want in this life. But I am not going to be killing myself, frankly, for work.
Yeah, I mean, those are a lot of the conversations that we have been having and just trends that we've been seeing as well as we're thinking about, employees' lives and the full person's life outside of work as well, and really not having the workplace really be the number one identifier of someone's life or personality as well. You mentioned really stepping up, speaking out, the role of private employers to really support folks as well. What do you see as the role of, private employers to really create more equity in the world? Because I think they personally do have a lot of kind of influence in the community and the people they employ and all those kind of realms.
Um, uh, Before I answer that, I just want to go back because you said something that just put a little bubble and
Yeah.
lightning over my head. It's the work is no longer your main identity, and I think that is hello. That is also like I am an HR and DEI leader, but that is not the only thing that defines me,
Right.
right? And so that's an important part of this, and I've lived for this moment that people are no longer primarily or solely defining themselves through what they do. I think that is so important
Yeah.
for our society. On how companies are and what their role is in creating equity, this certainly the last few years have, I think, demonstrated that it is critical for companies to stake out positions and to use and wield their power and to acknowledge that they do absolutely have power. that companies are not nameless, faceless entities, that they have the ability to affect change in our world in really significant ways. And so they need to use that power wisely. And what that means is actually, um, uh, one, figuring out their values and then speaking out and stepping out in support of those values. And you can see this, of course, with the response to the latest Roe decision in terms of how companies are speaking out and some of the things that they're saying. But it's interesting because I think companies are walking and straddling this line of, not wanting to turn off people who are opposed to reproductive rights, right? They don't want to put off those people, and so they're trying to walk this fine line of offering, certain benefits and certain policies, adjusting their policies, et cetera. And when I look at this, I think that there are ways that they could have made certain decisions and still can make certain decisions in support of equity for women, trans, and non-binary folks, and access to abortion care and reproductive health care, that requires them to move from a quote unquote neutral position to get from off the sidelines, because as they say, neutral is for whom? When you say you're neutral, you're really you are taking a position. You're not standing in the middle between two sides. You have, in effect, taken a position by being neutral. And so I think, companies are seeing that, but they're still trying to figure out what does that look like. And so you'll see this on a spectrum. You've seen a few companies really take some bold, meaning very clear, direct positions over the last few years. And then you've seen some companies, again, try to straddle that middle line.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with you that silence or inaction is an action in itself, because that is something that you're choosing to do it. You're choosing to do it. You have to own that, and it's really not possible to remain neutral in that way. And we're going to talk about that further as well. I also want to kind of ask you similarly about something that a lot of folks are looking for and seeking in their employer and the role of work is around that flexibility. We've talked about how you're continuing to build a culture internally that is anchored in that, but also tied to values as well. And flexibility is something that really helps everybody, but specifically caretakers, working parents, and research shows that it creates a more equitable workplace as well. How are you thinking about what flexibility looks like in this distributed workplace?
Oh yeah. So I think about it in a few different ways. One, about just from a basic foundational needs of, do people have what they need in order to do their best work? So from a technology perspective, how do we support people? And how do we support folks who are happy to work remote and see their colleagues a few times a year, right? But primarily want to work remotely. And how do we support people who actually need some interaction with people, and who may not necessarily be in where, quote unquote, headquarters was, or from a main office, but like they want to go work in a WeWork or some sort of co-working space a couple of times a week because they need human connection. And I think that's the foundational stuff. The important and the other aspects are, how do we sustain and evolve culture in a virtual setting? How do we make sure that equity is infused throughout everything across this virtual and remote setting? You can absolutely work effectively. You can build relationships virtually. And there are also times where you're going to want to come together in person for these, what I call moments that matter. And so, we'll define policies, processes for that, for How do we bring people together for those moments that matter on a team basis, on an org-wide basis? What does that look like? How do we make sure that people have what they need? And how do we make sure that there's also a continuous channel for people to voice that, there is a new need that they have that wasn't present before, right? Because this is not just a period where you can create and say, this is what we're doing now, and that's going to stand and hold until whatever. It is a period where you've got to keep this, constantly keep avenues open to listen, to make sure that people can bring feedback and elevate feedback and say, hey, this might have been working, but this isn't working now. Here's what's missing. The other piece is from an equity standpoint, is also looking at all of the data. So all of the little bits of data from engagement, right, to performance and talent management data, hiring data, right? So looking at equity and looking at all the data to see if there are any particular trends that stand out, that need attention or need to be addressed in some way, because maybe, certain colleagues, if you're distributed, right, maybe you're not promoted at the same rate, or etc. These are things these are, some of the things that, as we're working in this distributed way, and in a way that is really remote first, that I'm thinking about. And I know so many other, be it business leaders and HR leaders and DEI folks, are also thinking about, right? How do we meet the needs of people in this new, I'll say new-ish. It's not fully new, because lots of people have been doing this before, right? And so it's also a space where we need to look at companies and organizations that have been working in this way and see what we can learn and apply, and see what works for us, and what do we need to invent, just given the nuances within our spaces.
Absolutely. An opportunity to be creative, and also looking at the data, asking your team members for feedback in a continuous way, and also really thinking about, how do you meet people where you are, like you were talking about, and also being cognizant of things like distance bias, like people who are, having more face time with their manager, things of that nature too, looking at promotions, looking at succession planning as well. I do want to talk about, we've seen a couple organizations use the phrase, it's political, so we don't want to talk about it. Or, these are the things that we are not going to talk about at work. These are the things that we are going to talk about work as well, treating people a little bit less than adults, in my opinion, but who am I to say as well? But people are looking for, organizations that really reflect their values. More than 60% of employees say it's important for their company to really share in the caring of their families as well as their communities. Why is it a myth that it's possible to quote unquote stay neutral in this climate?
Oh, I think it's absolutely a myth, for the reasons that you named, that this matters to people, that people are, employees, talent, people are looking for orgs to take a stand and to stake a position. And so neutrality, and I always ask the question, neutral for whom, right? Like, whom does it serve when you stay neutral? If you are quiet about this thing, because I can tell you, as a person who holds multiple marginalized identities, when you are quiet about this thing, it is ultimately harmful to me, right? And I know that that's how it feels on the end of individuals as well as communities. That when you are, serving neutrality, that you are ultimately harming these communities. Companies want, people want companies to actually take a stand. Leanin.org actually just released some new research. They surveyed, employees across industries, and they found that, more than 3/4 of women think that overturning Roe v. Wade will ultimately hurt women's careers. 2/3 of men and women under 40 actually want to work for a company that supports access to abortion. Hello, this matters to people. And that more than a third of employees under 40 are considering switching jobs to work for companies that are doing more to support and protect abortion access, right? So this matters to people, right? Standing up, being clear about what organizational values are, about what you're willing to do to stand up and support not just those values, but also to support and protect the rights of people is important to people. Yes, important from a talent perspective, potential employees, but people are willing to make decisions with their feet and say, I don't want to work for this company because they've taken this or they've done this or not done this. And so it's absolutely important. And neutrality is no longer serves will serve companies ultimately. And it feels risky. I think it feels risky to people to take these positions, and it's calculated because they're thinking about, well, then we'll draw scrutiny from these politicians, etc. And I come back to, and ultimately this is about supporting this community, these communities that are under attack, that are feeling attacked, right? And that's the most important thing. You have resources to navigate when you're feeling as a huge, or as a large company, etc., when you're attacked. Individuals don't have the same resources. Communities don't have the same resources. We need your help.
Absolutely. I definitely agree that organizations have an immense amount of resources, and I appreciate you sharing that data as well. That really reflects that this is something that people really care deeply about. They will make decisions based on their employer, on the values and the things that people do or do not stand for. And we have seen a lot of this kind of play out in statements that people make, support, resources. I would love to ask, what have you seen as really effective communication and support from organizations in response to the Supreme Court's decision overturning Roe v. Wade?
Yeah, I've seen, I do, lots of companies have stepped up and created policies for and benefits, offering employees the ability to travel out of state to seek access to abortion care, to get abortion care, to support their reproductive health needs. And I think that's wonderful. And it is it's worth looking at who has access to those benefits, right? So the critique is that the majority of employees, workers who have access to those benefits are also employees who are well positioned to be able to manage that for themselves, right? Who can make choices and who have more ability to move, for example, to relocate to a state or area in which abortion care is legal. So I think that is valid. I've also seen companies certainly, making some changes in terms of politicians that they donate to, these PACs that they donate to as well. I've seen some companies have leaders speak out, which I think is important. And I've seen some really go, far in terms of we'll relocate you or help to relocate you, which I think is tremendous. And I also struggle with that because that's challenging for people to do that. I could relocate, but then I might be leaving behind family, my community, etc. And so, is that what people need, or is what we need for companies to really step up in mass and to protect rights and ensure that they are contributing in ways to help enshrine civil rights and protections for the most marginalized.
Those are good examples that you gave as well, in the multitude of ways that folks are really leaning in and thinking about systemic ways that they can help with resources and benefits and just their processes as well. This question is a little bit vague on purpose, but what's giving you the most hope these days?
Oh, I love this question. What's giving me the most hope is actually this moment, and it feels really tumultuous. Everything feels really uncertain. But I think, what gives me hope is that the possibility of what can be and will be born out of that out of tumult, out of uncertainty is where you get the rebirth, where you get uh, to new heights and to new possibilities, because you realize that what did work just no longer works, right? It doesn't serve majority, it doesn't serve most people. And so now you've really got to do something different, and you're pushed to do something different. And that's what gives me hope. What gives me hope is also some of the things that we talked about people reevaluating their relationship to work. I think that is amazing and beautiful. And what's beautiful about it is what it will mean for the people who are coming up into the workforce, and that we will shift away from a hustle, do all the things, work culture that is really rooted in white supremacy, into one that is perhaps more focused on having balance in our lives, and tending to what matters most to us, and work being a part of our lives, but not being our sole identities and the primary and only focus of our life, and what matters most to us.
I think that's very helpful, kind of like a snowball effect for future generations and also hopefully society at large as well. Katrina, is there anything that I didn't ask that you want to share with folks who are listening, or underscore anything we have discussed before we end our conversation?
Yes, there's one. There was a question on the list about if you had a magic wand, what
Yes.
would your job easier?
Yes.
What would make your job easier? Um, uh, Definitely for people to sit and exist more from a place of curiosity. And so not, jumping into I have the answers or I have to have all the answers, but really just creating spaciousness and existing in that, to be curious about perspectives that are unfamiliar to them or different from theirs, and to be curious about what they don't know. That would be so mean. That would be one thing that would make my job a lot easier.
Exist from a place of curiosity. And I think that goes to also having that growth mindset of really continuously learning as well. And it's okay not to have all the answers, but be curious about what those answers are as well.
Exactly.
And who has them. So Katrina, thank you so much for being on Reimagining Company Culture this afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you again for having me. It has been such a privilege and joy to be in conversation with you.
Of course, and as a reminder for folks who are listening, at AllVoices, we really believe in employees and employers being seen, heard, and understood, and know it's a requirement for the business to succeed overall. Have a great rest of your day, everyone.